Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this week I'm foregoing a vlog style video because I have two things that I want to share with you that really kind of require me to talk to you and show you what I'm doing. These are two more recent questions that I've been getting. The first one is, why did I convert my sourdough starter to a stiff starter? How did I do that? Why did I, what's the difference? And I'm going to go through all that today. And another one that I've gotten more lately than usual is, can I make all-purpose flour out of my freshly milled flour? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to show you how to do that later on in this video, so stay tuned for that. But first, I want to talk about stiff sourdough starters. Why that I went to a stiff starter, what I've noticed after using it for a while, and why you would want to, like, what is the difference? And so we're just going to get all in that today. And like I said, a little bit later, we're going to make some all-purpose flour because I'm going to be putting on some sourdough bread. I'm getting ready to mix up my sourdough bread, and I want to show you my starter about 3 hours after I fed it. As you can see, it's really active, but I want to show you the difference in a stiff starter to a liquid starter. There we go. There's really no bubbles on top. The thick starter keeps the bubbles kind of down underneath the top, and it stays active for like up to 14 days for me because I keep it in the fridge. And so I want to show you as I scoop it out to put it in my water for my recipe that I'm making. And then I'm going to tell you some pros and cons and what I have found to be the biggest difference, and also some modifications I've had to make to my sourdough bread recipe because of this particular ratio of a starter. So for this recipe, I need 100 grams of starter, and as you can see, it's extremely thick. It is not like your regular starter. It's clumpy, thick, like a dough. And so I'm going to turn my scale on here and get 100 grams of this starter. As you can see, it doesn't just fall off the spoon like a liquid starter would. You may have to get your clean hands in on this one. I'm looking for 100 grams. Okay, so what are some differences in using a stiff starter compared to a more liquid starter? The first big difference that I ran into is I needed to increase the water in my sourdough bread recipe. Normally it was 350 grams, and I had to kind of up that to 375. Now you'll notice I'm gonna put some footage in here of this. I am experimenting with a high hydration sourdough recipe, and that uses 400 grams of water, and so I'm going to be showing you a little bit of that as far as the stretching and the folding and the texture of it. But normally I would use 375 grams of water with this stiff starter, whereas if I had a more liquid starter, I used 350 grams of water. So the way that you look at it, to convert your liquid starter to a stiff starter, you need to drastically reduce the amount of water that you're putting into the starter. So for instance, if you feed your starter 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water, you want to bring that down to half a cup of water. So you're going to go 50% hydrated instead of 100%. Same for grams if you're using, and I don't do grams, and so I know a lot of people call me out and say I should do grams, but for those of you who do, if you do 100 grams of flour, do 50 grams of water. And you get like what is similar to maybe what I would call kind of a biscuit dough consistency. You can go as thick as you want. You can go like a kneadable dough if you want to. I'm in between like stiff bread dough and biscuit dough. That's where I am with mine. And so the reason that I did it, and I know I get a lot of questions, how can I make my sourdough more sour? I'm the opposite. I want my sourdough to not be quite as tangy and sour, especially when I'm making things like biscuits or sweets. And a thick, stiff starter is not as sour. It grows more yeast, which has that yeasty sweet flavor, than the acetic acid or lactic acid that gives it that really sour. So you know how you put your sourdough starter in the fridge after you feed it, and a day or two later it's got this black or gray liquid on top called hooch that is like nail polish remover smell. The stiff starter, I haven't had that, and I mean it was in the refrigerator for 10 days and it did not get a liquid on top. It was still bubbly. It was I was using it and it was raising dough with no problem. And so I think that for me, the pros are less sour, less feeding, less maintenance, and pretty much zero discard or hungry starter. Because you know, you get to that point where you're like, I don't even know if this is going to raise my bread because it's been in here for 2 weeks and it's just flat with this liquid on top. I haven't had that with a stiff starter. It's just a matter of kind of adjusting your recipes a little. You don't have to add a ton more water to your recipes if you use a stiff starter. I'm talking a 1/4 cup maybe of extra water, and that's all you're going to need. But I feel like that I keep saying, why didn't I do this from the beginning? Because if you want a no fuss, like lowest maintenance starter ever, you need to convert your starter to a stiff starter. I'm writing a blog post about it, giving you all the details, and as soon as I'm done, I'll link it in the description box of this video. I'm still working on it, and I'm going to link a blog post for sifting your freshly milled flour for all-purpose flour. But the thing about it is, for me anyway, I want the least hands-on approach to sourdough as possible. I want to use the least amount of flour. Flour is expensive. Not just flour, but you know, wheat berries are expensive. And when you're feeding a starter twice a week, if you can cut that down to like once every 2 weeks, over the time, you're going to save quite a bit of money with feeding it this way. So to make all-purpose flour, or something really similar to all-purpose flour with freshly milled flour, it's pretty simple. You are going to need a sifter. I use a 60 mil. I'll link it down in the description box below. They're really inexpensive, and it's a super, super fine mesh that takes out everything except a certain size particle. So the germ is going to be left behind most of it, and what you're going to end up with is a really light, fluffy flour. So to make all-purpose flour from freshly milled flour, you want to mill your flour as usual on whatever setting you usually mill it on, and then you're going to put it through a 60 mil, even up to an 80 mil some people use to sift out the germ. And the way I like to do it is put it over a really big bowl and just tap it with my hand until all I have left behind is the little bits of germ. And so what you end up with is a super light, fluffy flour. It's not technically like store-bought all-purpose flour, but it is quite a bit fluffier and lighter than just 100% freshly milled flour. So you do get kind of the benefits of that. So if you're looking for a flour to make, say, pastries or like add into your freshly milled bread recipes to just lighten them up a bit, I think that this is a really good choice because you're not going to be stripping it completely of all of its nutrients. You're just going to be stripping some of that out. Now, what can you do with the bran and germ, or the germ that's left over? There's so many things you can do with it. You can add it into some muffins or pancakes to add some added fiber and vitamins and minerals. You can soak it and add it back into your bread so that it doesn't weigh as heavy in the bread recipe. You can feed it to your chickens. My chickens love it. I don't always reuse it. Honestly, I never sift my flour. I used to. Years ago, I got into it and I would sift a portion of my flour. I haven't done that in years, and so I just wanted to show y'all this on this video because I have a lot of questions about it. And so I wanted to make sure that I made a video showing you. I'm doing a blog post about it. As soon as it's done, I'll link it in the description box below. But there are applications where sifted fresh milled flour can be a good idea, and it is better than buying like all-purpose flour from the store, in my opinion, because you still have some of that nutrition left behind. So I'm going to show you my process for sifting freshly milled flour and show you kind of the difference between the ground whole flour and then the sifted flour. Okay, so we're going to sift this. I want to show you. This is the flour sifter that I have. It's a 60 mil, very fine mesh sifter. Now, you can use a regular sifter, but you won't get nearly the fine, fluffy, more white flour than you will if you use one of these. So what I like to do is I like to put it over a really big bowl. See how it fits down in there, because it gets a little messy when you're doing this, so just kind of keep that in mind. So all I'm going to do is pour this into the sifter. And you just tap the sides until you're just left with the hard bran and germ. So I wanted to stop for a minute and show you. This is very fine, very light flour. I mean, it is very similar to store-bought. There's no coarseness at all, because what you're doing is just sifting out the starch. And it leaves you with what's like an all-purpose flour. You can add this to your bread recipe if you want to add a little bit of flour that's not quite as heavy as a fresh milled flour. So you may be asking, what do I do with all of that, all that bran and germ? There's a few things that you can do with it. You can add it into other recipes like muffins and pancakes, and I'm trying to think, like some cookie recipes, different things like that. For extra fiber and vitamins and minerals, you want to use it fairly quickly or put it in the fridge until you can use it. You can feed it to your chickens. My chickens love it, and it adds some nutrition to their diet, so I'm fine with that. You can soak it in warm water to soften it and then add it back into your bread recipe for a softer bread altogether. But I never hardly do this. I'm doing it just for this video because I just prefer to grind my flour fine and just use it. But a lot of you have asked about this, and so I wanted to share it with you today that you can sift your freshly milled flour. Just grind it a bit coarser. It doesn't have to be coarse, but a bit coarser so that you are able to separate those a little bit easier, because it does take a little bit of time to sift the flour through one of these types of sifters. There's also, if you happen to have a Como flour mill or grain mill, they have a sifter attachment that you can put on it. I'm not sure if there's one for the Bosch mixer. I'll look, and if there is, I'll link it in the description box below and try to remember to put it across here. There are mechanical sifters that you can use that will leave you with a much finer flour as well, so you don't have to pat on that for 10 or 15 minutes to get the flour out. I do it so rarely, and actually it's been years since I did it, that I've never considered like purchasing an electric flour sifter. But if you are really interested in it and you feel like you would use it a lot, I would 100% go for an electric sifter, because it does take a little bit of time and it gets a little monotonous sitting there going like this for a while. It's just not really worth it to me. But that's me. I prefer all the nutrition in my flour and to keep it. But it is nice on occasions, if you're making biscuits or pastries, to have a sifted flour so that it is, you know, a little more soft and fine like you would get from the store. Now what I'm going to do with what I've got left over is put it through just a regular sifter and get some of the bran and germ back in there, and then any of the bigger pieces I'm just going to feed to my chickens. So I really hope that there was something in this video today that helped you if you've had these questions, or maybe it sparked in you, hey, I may try to do that with my starter. Give it a try. I think you're going to be surprised. I forgot to tell you the biggest part. My bread is fluffier. My freshly milled sourdough bread is actually fluffier on the inside than when I was using a liquid starter. So that was the best pro of all, and I didn't even go over the negatives because I don't really see any yet. The only negative I could see is that you have to adjust your recipes to add just a little bit more water, and that's it. You're going to have less maintenance, use less flour, and your bread's actually going to rise better. So I would suggest at least try it. You can always go back to a thinner pourable starter. It's going to be just fine. Those bacteria and yeasts aren't going to die because you change the consistency. But I would say give it a try and just see if it works for you too. If you keep a stiff starter, let me know in the description box below, because I am just now getting in this and I love it. So, and also if you sift your flour, let me know what you use it for, because I never do it and it's just not something that I have felt the need to do, but I can see where it might be helpful. So if you do that, let me know down below why you would do it, or why you know what recipes that you use your sifted freshly milled flour in, and share it with everyone in the comments section below. All right, well, thank you for joining me this week, and we will see you next week for a brand new video.